Hello and welcome back to An Old Man Watches, and today I'm going to be talking about Ralph Bakshi's 1977 animated fantasy film Wizards, an epic fantasy in a world of peace and magic. Maybe not so much with the peace, actually. It is 2 million years after the Earth was destroyed, or devastated at the very least, by nuclear war. The humans who survived the apocalypse have been transformed, both physically and mentally, into deformed mutants. The long ago apocalypse did, however, allow for the return of the planet's true children, fairies, elves, and dwarves, who dwelled in peace and harmony for thousands of years. Into this world were born twin wizards, the kind-hearted Avatar and his wicked mutant brother Black Wolf. Black Wolf attempted to usurp control of the fairy kingdom, but was driven away by Avatar. Fleeing into the mutant wasteland, the malevolent wizard spent centuries searching for secrets of the ancient world, certain that in the pre-war past lay the secrets that would allow him to forge mutant kind into an unstoppable army of conquest. And that's just the opening couple of minutes of montage. The actual film itself only starts from this point, with Black Wolf dispatching assassins, including the robot Necron 99, who is pictured on your screen, to assassinate the leaders of elf and fairy kind. So Wizards was written and directed by Ralph Bakshi, who was best known at the time for his adult-oriented animated films like Fritz the Cat. This movie was apparently his attempt to produce a more family-oriented picture. And, I mean, I guess he did technically manage to get a PG rating for it, so, technically he succeeded. But given that the film includes a buxom, scantily clad woman as a major character, as well as smutty humour, drug references, themes of sexual exploitation, and plenty of animated blood and violence, I think we need to emphasise the technically part over the succeeded part. And that's without even discussing the fact that Black Wolf's secret weapon turns out to be Nazi propaganda films, with the film being full of swastikas and other Nazi iconography. So despite its rating, this is not a movie I suggest you show your little kids. It's much more pitched at a mid to late teens bracket. That's probably the age group where the film's racy content and interesting character designs will likely be enough to offset its narrative and production weaknesses. More on those later. So, the first of the weaknesses, in fact, is that the film relies very heavily on narration. My entire summary of the film's background and a whole lot of other details that I skipped are narrated in the movie's opening montage. On multiple other occasions of the film, Bakshi resorts to the same technique to leap the story forward without the need to actually depict the related scenes. It's a time-saving technique, and probably a cost-effective technique, but it is also a clumsy technique. Narration can break immersion, and it's particularly frustration giving some of the other rather random extraneous content that Bakshi did choose to include in his film. For instance, there's a scene where there are three mutant prostitutes propositioning men. This is an odd thing to include in a supposedly family film at all, and it adds nothing to the story. But somebody obviously got paid to sit there and animate it, which is particularly frustrating, given that Bakshi took so many cheap shortcuts with other animated sequences that are much more important to the narrative. He makes enormous use of rotoscoping, for instance. Now, the basic concept of rotoscoping, if you haven't heard of it, is to take live action footage and then have animators trace over it. In theory, this can be used to provide highly realistic animation and potentially saves money, since the animators are working from a guide that will speed their work. Bakshi, however, had very limited resources. His total budget for Wizards was less than that allocated to Disney's Pinocchio nearly 40 years earlier. So you factor in like 40 years of inflationary costs, he still had less money in just raw terms. There are a couple of implications to this. Number one, they didn't film new footage of actors. They reused footage from existing movies, just buying stock footage, basically. And then, rather than detailed tracing over these stock footage, he had the art team just use abstracted washes of black and a single other colour, such as green or red, creating what looks a bit like live-action shadow puppets. A significant portion of the film's runtime, including pretty much every battle scene, are dominated by this footage. It doesn't look particularly good, and it doesn't blend at all well with the hand-drawn elements of the film. Now, possibly also as a cost-cutting measure, many of the narrated sequences of the film take place over a montage of still images using concept art for the film rather than actual animation. Now, that may have saved a few dollars, but it also has the unfortunate effect of showing how much better executed the concept art is than the film's animated art. Some of the concept art is really beautiful and is worth looking up online if you're interested in this kind of stuff. So am I saying the movie's bad and you shouldn't watch it? Well, not entirely. I think Wizards is deeply flawed and clearly underfunded, and it has something of an identity crisis about what kind of film it is. But there are some good scenes and ideas, even if the execution is somewhat sloppy and there's a fair bit of puerile humour. Also, if you're a Star Wars fan, you might want to check out the movie because it contains the first ever movie credit for, well, not Luke Skywalker because he's fictional, but Mark Hamill, who does have a voice role in the film, albeit only as a fairly minor character. He plays Sean, son of the King of the Mountain Fairies. Wizards and Star Wars were, in fact, both in production at the same time, with this film making it to cinemas 3 months before George Lucas's science fiction adventure smashed the box office. Hamill's casting in both films actually led to the name of this film being changed, in fact. It was originally titled War Wizards, but Lucas asked Bakshi to drop the word war from the title in order to lessen the chance of confusion between the two projects. I think that chance of confusion seems pretty small, but Lucas had been cooperative about allowing Hamill to take time off from Star Wars to record his lines to Wizards, so Bakshi agreed to the request. So, that's Wizards. It's frankly a bit of a mess in a very 70s way, but it's an at times interesting mess. If a somewhat psychedelic post-apocalyptic fantasy adventure sounds like your thing, and you don't mind the fact that at times it's clearly written by an oversexed 12-year-old boy, check it out. Next time, Paul W.S. Anderson's 1998 science fiction action film Soldier, which sadly failed to find the audience that I think it deserved. But that's next time. Until then, thanks for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed it.